Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Bajaj Autos conference call to discuss the second quarter fiscal year 2022 financial results. We have with us Mr. Rakesh Sharma, Executive Director, Mr. Soumen Ray, Chief Financial Officer, and Mr. Anand Newar, Divisional Manager, Investor Relations. My name is Rituja, and I will be your coordinator. At this time, the participants are in the listen-only mode, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference call, please signal an operator by pressing star then zero on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I now hand the conference over to the management. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rakesh Sharma here. Thank you very much for joining the call. I hope everyone's keeping safe and healthy. Because our board meeting concluded only at 5:30 or so yesterday, so we announced our results, Q2 results only in the evening. But I hope by now you have had some opportunity to look into the details. I would like to divide my opening remarks to three parts. We'll first focus on certain key highlights of Q2. I'm sure everyone is keen to know about how demand is shaping up in the festive, so a quick comment on festive and immediate outlook. And then regarding the announcement of the captive financing unit yesterday, we'll conclude with some comments on that. So let me begin, as always, by first re-emphasizing our overall approach of driving growth, market share, and financial performance through upgrading the customer to better product propositions within segments and across segments in both domestic as well as international markets. We kept true to this in Q2 as well. This strategy leverages our R&D prowess, and it continues to work well for us. The domestic motorcycles business unit. I would prefer to take an H1 view of industry performance instead of just making a comment on Q2, just to smoothen the base of last year. Because in the first 6 months, there are so many ups and downs, but most of the pent-up demand has got released and exhausted by end of September or so. So it is better to take a look at H1 to understand how industry is behaving. In wholesale or billing terms, the industry grew by 7% in H1 compared to the same period last year, and our growth has been higher at 13%, leading to an obvious market share improvement. But in market shares, I prefer, and we prefer in our company now, to be entirely led by Vahan data, because the billing data is also dictated by each company's own strategy for managing the supply chain, stock, etc. Vahan data, which is registration, is the truest reflection of retail performance. It covers only 85% of the industry, but that's a good indicator. It excludes at this point of time Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Chhattisgarh. So we closed the quarter at 20% market share, up from 17% at the end of FY 2021. This increase in market share was largely driven by advancements in entry commuter based on converting or upgrading kickstart customers to electric starts, and by Pulsar 125 in the mid segment through attracting up customers from 100cc segments on the basis of a very attractive proposition of a sporty, best-in-class performance in the 125cc segment. We had introduced 2 new products in April, so they've had 2 quarters full run, the new look CT110X and our most expensive 125cc product, the Pulsar NS125. Both have done well, and sales have doubled for both between Q1 and Q2. Market share grew across all states, barring one, I think it was Orissa, where we need to fix some distribution issues. Finance sales grew faster than cash sales, and growth was higher in medium and large towns compared to rural and metro areas. In the intracity business unit, the domestic three-wheeler business recovered very swiftly after the second wave, and that's helped by the return of normalcy in terms of the opening up of schools and shopping areas across the country, leading to a rise in traffic. The business unit delivered a superb performance, leveraging upon its leadership and deep connect with the franchise. Market share is now increased to 68% in quarter 2. And we are now the leaders in every single segment, in small passenger, in large passenger, and in cargo, which we have entered only recently in the last 2-3 years. Now, petrol, diesel, alternate fuels, if you cut the market basis of fuels, there also in every segment we are leaders. The last two segments, which is the large passenger and cargo, we have wrested leadership for the first time in Q2. At an overall level, we hope we will cross 20,000 unit retails in October, which will be a relief because the last time we did so was in March 20. Exports business unit. Exports continues to deliver a strong performance, managing significant shipping issues. An average rate of over 200,000 per month was maintained right through the quarter, despite key markets like Philippines, which is amongst our top 5 markets, operating at just 50% levels, and Sri Lanka continues to be at nil. 90% of our revenue continues to come from markets where we are number 1 or number 2, and in all top markets, we either increased or defended our high market shares. We clocked our highest ever sales in Latin America, as well as in the Pulsar brand. As a result, the premium part of our portfolio in export continues to steadily expand, again reflecting our focus on upgrading and premiumization. Dominar 250 started to find itself into several markets, and along with the 400, it has made excellent progress. We believe we are on the verge of leadership in the 250cc segment in several key markets like Turkey and Mexico and other markets in Latin America. This again goes towards premiumization and overall strengthens the luster and the brand equity of Bajaj. Our share of 40 commuters in the 150 to 250cc range now stands at an overwhelming 45% across all emerging markets. Chetak bookings have now opened in Chennai and Hyderabad, and we are seeing a very, very strong response there. We are now present in 8 cities, but we are calibrating further rollout plans with supply chain visibility, intending to reach up to 30 cities still by March 22. We have over 4 to 5 months of bookings, and our priority is to service these customers and restrain rollouts in new geographies. On financials, as you know, DGFT had announced the rate under RoDTEP, which has resulted in rupees 82 crores of earnings towards Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year. We have also received NEI benefits pertaining to previous year from April to December, which was an additional 60 crores. This has significantly bolstered the EBITDA performance, but it is important to separate this effect and look at the underlying EBITDA. Without this effect, the underlying EBITDA stands at 15%, which sequentially is a decline from the 15.6% level of Q1. This gap of about 0.6 percentage points is entirely attributed to the under-recovery of pricing costs by pricing actions which actually were carried out through the quarter. The only other significant point I would like to highlight is the impact of semiconductor chip availability. Though not as severe as for four-wheelers, almost 20% of our motorcycle portfolio, which is a premium end, has got affected. Here we have seen gaps of up to 50% in demand and supply, causing stockouts across overseas markets and affecting the KTM, Dominar, and Pulsar brands. We have taken a sanguine view of this uncertainty and believe that this may, or we would like to assume that this may carry on well into the next year for the next 3 or 4 quarters. Hence, we are preparing for the worst and taking countermeasures to rejig our portfolio as well as marketing programs, particularly in overseas markets where we have some play. In India, as you know, there is a statutory requirement of putting ABS in 150 plus. And we will try to mitigate some of the impact of this shortage. Of course, if there is, if the visibility improves and we start to get better availability, we'll be more than happy. Now, a few quick comments on the current festive. So we are now in the middle of the 35-day festive period. The Dussehra states in the east and south, to some extent, are done with the festive. Thus far, the demand pattern has been quite lukewarm, with retail in a like-for-like comparison with last year being at negative levels. Rural demand lagged urban demand, and entry segments are taking the bigger hit. Our view is that in the next 10-15 days, there should be a marked uptick as decisions come to a close towards Diwali and Dhanteras. But even taking that into account, the festive period may deliver most likely a similar performance as last year, same period. We will be taking this into account for planning production in the November to December period, preferring to ensure stocks are brought in line with the exact retail performance. Our stocks currently, on the basis of current retails, are at about 7 to 8 weeks, and we will be wanting to get them to under 6 weeks. The three-wheeler business is very well poised, and based on the return to normalcy, we expect Q3 to be better than Q2. Similarly, we think exports should cross 200,000 per month throughout quarter 3, setting us up very nicely to deliver a highest ever performance in exports of almost 2.3 million units. And with this, we will also cross the $2 billion mark for exports in FY22. Headwinds on the cost side continue. They're less severe than before, but we are expecting cost increases of up to 2% in the next quarter. We'll be looking at passing them on based on an evaluation of demand sensitivities and competitor moves, particularly in those segments where we are not leaders. Finally, as all would be aware by now, that Bajaj Auto in its board meeting yesterday has passed a resolution to apply for the formation of an NBFC to serve its requirements of captive auto financing. Retail financing is expected to play an even larger role in the sales of two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Along with that, customer is clearly seeking a seamless and an integrated experience of sales, service, and finance. To ensure that we have the flexibility and the command to deliver the experience to the customer, as well as the agility to create customized solutions for new emerging requirements like financing, stock leasing of electric vehicles, or say even a personal cube, we believe a captive finance unit will enhance our go-to-market capabilities. We will, of course, continue to engage and invest in our relationships with our current financiers, of which, as you know, Bajaj Finance Limited is the largest. Combined with their power, the specialization of a captive auto finance unit will considerably strengthen this important lever of growth. Thank you very much for listening in, and with this, we will open the floor for Q&A.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and one on the touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and two. Participants are requested to use handsets while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. The first question is from the line of Binay Singh from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead.
Hi team, thanks for the opportunity. My first question is on the cost increases. Did I hear it correct that you said there should be another 2% price hike to offset all the cost pressures?
No, Binay, Soumen here. We have said that directionally there could be a 2% further cost increase in Q3 over the base of Q2.
Okay. And so how much of sort of end consumer pricing do you need to take up to offset that fully?
So we fit 2% is the cost increase with a business which is barely double-digit EBITDA. You need to pass the whole thing. But I think the point that Rakesh mentioned is not the mathematics of it. The point that Rakesh mentioned was we are already into festive. Demand does not seem to be going up. There are competitive pressures. So the practicality of taking up prices itself is a big challenge, whether it is domestic or exports.
Yeah, no, in fact, that's the question I was trying to get on to, that, in the past we've seen that sales promotion spending and, advertising spend, a lot of that for the two-wheeler industry was contained. So do you see those sort of pressures coming back now for the industry as there is muted demand, weak pricing, and also electric vehicle headwinds coming through?
See, certainly when demand is not booming and there is a cost pressure from the raw material side, then looking at company costs, whether they are sales, promotion, or maintenance, or any other thing, which doesn't hurt the strategy or impair the company, we will continue to examine every single expense very, very closely. That is our nature, and we will continue to do that. On the headwinds from electric side, on the ICE side, I would still not think that it has started to affect us. I think it has not even started to affect the scooter demand as such. That is the drift I'm getting from colleagues in other companies, which have got a much more substantive scooter business. What I'm hearing is that it is still not make. Of course, in the future, this whole thing is open. We are a little bit distant from it, given that motorcycles is probably going to be affected much later by electric than scooters.
And thanks for that, Rakesh. That brings me to the second question on the electric side. We've started to see some of your peer group in the listed space announce capacities that they are ramping up on the electric side. Any plans that Bajaj would like to share that what should we expect in terms of the dedicated capacity or capex or anything on the model cycle side on the EV side?
See, we have said this before, Binay, that in this phase, our objective is really to build capabilities and, attack the more premium end of the market, and through that to get good mind share in large parts of the country. Our ambitions are not really only volumetric at this stage. In terms of manufacturing capability, we have indicated that we would certainly like to put in, manufacturing capability of about 500,000 units. But see, in our case, we don't need to take action for putting in, let's say, 10 million units. We find in flexing capacity is very, very easy for us. So at this stage, we're looking at 500,000 per annum, and we will watch how the whole transition unfolds. We will try to drive it in the areas which we feel are going to be beneficial for us, and we will expand capacity as and when required.
Vinay, just to add to what Rakesh said, see, it is very convenient for us, anyone, to say that 1,000 crore number, because the PLI needs you to invest 1,000 crore in 5 years. So I think the genesis of 1,000 crores is the fact that PLI warrants that you need to invest that 1,000 crores.
That's a good point. Thanks, team. I'll come back in the queue.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Pramod Kumar from UBS. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks a lot for the opportunity. Rakesh, just one question on the first question is on the EV subsidiary. What are your thoughts on the capital structure for this particular entity, and especially given your alliance with KTM and the Cross AG? So, do you see them becoming a partner in your EV subsidiary, and also related to that, are you as an organization open to getting external investors into this this particular subsidiary, given probably to fast track investments, depending on how you see the industry unfolding? So, if you can just share some broader thoughts on this.
Yeah. So, Pramod, certainly, this is a very big move, as we think from our side. The formation of the subsidiary and its build-up and its growth, etc. The one or two questions are hanging. Particularly there is a clarification which we have sought from the government on the PLI, and because there is a little bit of a fuzziness over there, and I'm in general investments made in group towards EV in the group, irrespective of whether they're made in the subsidiary or in the parent company, will get counted for that 1,000 crore hurdle rate of capital investment. But there is some place where it leads on to a grey area. So we've asked for some clarification through SIAM and directly. Once we receive the clarification, we will be absolutely clear as to what kind of a body and structure to give to the subsidiary, whether manufacturing should be here or manufacturing should be in the parent company and stuff like that. So that is one, because that also then drives the capital investment part of it. But irrespective of that, in the least, of course, the front end and product development and many such capabilities will be invested into the EV company. We are through the EV company also looking at agile, smarter, different, very focused and dedicated way of working in EV. Now, whether we will take in a partner, whether it's KTM or somebody else or a financial investor, these questions we have discussed. These questions will continue to be discussed, I think, for some time. It is early days for us to conclude on them, but they are very much on the agenda in the boardroom.
Thanks, Rakesh. The second question is on the electric three-wheeler, because if I recollect right, in a recent media interview, you guys have said that Jan to March quarter, you will launch your debut electric three-wheeler, right? So just want to understand, given the cost dynamics and the use case, is it logical to expect that ideally it should be a cargo three-wheeler where you kind of tie up with online retailers like Amazon or a Flipkart, where there's a defined use case and volumetric data, not exactly very weight intensive data, cargo, or are you think the passenger three-wheeler market is also ready for electric three-wheelers from a commercial standpoint, in terms of having a competitive pricing and also having a quicker turnaround on the charging side and all of that? So if you can just share broader thoughts on that as well.
See, what I said was actually that we are the prototypes are on the road right now, and we will be testing till January, February, March, and post that hopefully we will be launching in the around the March to May period, depending on what kind of look back we have to do after the test. So that's on the time frame. The while the case for on the personal side, which is the two-wheeler, is largely driven by convenience and the operating cost, where the personal customer tends to sort of ignore the capital cost which has already been made, and they get more swayed by the monthly expenses, which of course in an EV scooter are much lower than an ICE. So to that, and then of course there is this whole thing about convenience and the women not having to go to the petrol stations or service stations, etc., which adds a few more reasons for the EV scooter to be bought. But when you then flip over onto the commercial side, this is a purely commercial decision, and the guy has to pay EMI, has to earn more than the EMI, right?
Yeah.
And when you compare like for like with a CNG three-wheeler, and now you know that the CNG program has been progressing extremely well, and the government has put a lot of might behind expanding the CNG network. So when you compare the CNG total cost of ownership, now we don't look at only operating cost, but we look at total cost of ownership. Then the case for a EV three-wheeler, whether it is cargo or it's passenger, is very similar or slightly weak compared to a CNG three-wheeler. Of course, compared to LPG, it is slightly better and much better when you compare it to diesel. So, therefore, the migration from ICE to lithium-ion powered three-wheelers is probably going to take longer. In this, the jack in the box will be government subsidies, government support, and government regulations. Now, government regulation mandates that you can only use electric three-wheelers, and that demand gets created. But left on its own, the case for migration in electric two-wheelers is far more strong. The case for migration in three-wheelers is weaker.
Great, Rakesh. Final question to Soumen. A quick view on the margin outlook, given where we are on the demand side in domestic and also the commodity inflation. If you can just share broader thoughts on how do you see margins evolving in the next few quarters, and also related to that is basically a new product introduction, which is the new Pulsar platform, and what could the impact of that will be in terms of our profitability, because it's a big changeover which is expected with the new Pulsar. So if you can just share thoughts on that, Soumen, that will be great.
Yeah. So first of all, on margin, primarily because of commodities. See, the problem that is happening is it is going yo-yo. For example, in Q3, steel seems to be stable. Some noble metals have softened, but then aluminium has more than made it up. On one side, because of semiconductor shortage, there should be less demand for all of these, at least from the automobile sector, which should bring it down. But that is not happening because of multiple other reasons. When the semiconductor shortage goes off, the demand for all metals will again come back with a bang. And most likely it will drive up prices again. So, honestly speaking, at this point in time, the variability of auto demand because of availability of semiconductors and external reasons is making it very difficult to predict beyond possibly the next quarter. As Rakesh mentioned, next quarter we have a cost increase of about 2%. We do not know whether there will be price that we can take up to pass this through and all that. So I would say margins would be under pressure. Coming to your point around Pulsar, I think this is one of those rare cases where we are relaunching something which is already very successful. And to give a oomph to the new product, you need to add things which always costs money. So I would say that the upside that can happen is basis the success of the launch as opposed to the intrinsic EBITDA of the product. The intrinsic EBITDA of the product will not be very different from what we are otherwise doing, because we already have a very, very successful high volume scaled up production of Pulsar. The new one, if it replaces some competition, gets some market share, drives volume up, then it can. But standalone, it will not make a very big difference in the EBITDA profile of the company.
Thanks, Soumen. Just to clarify on the pricing bit, even is exports also, given the strong momentum and where oil prices is and what it does to the underlying economy in those markets, even export pricing is a bit of a challenge, or it's much better than domestic?
Export pricing is a very big challenge. And if you would have seen our results, we have shown a lower CD volume in exports in Q2 compared to what we normally do. And that pressure, albeit very small and we have overcome it, has been because of our pricing. Because unfortunately, not every player in the global market is reacting to cost increases the way we are reacting. So that is creating further pressure, and there are pockets when somebody is stronger and in pockets where somebody else is stronger. Wherever we are stronger, we are taking up prices, but the competition across, whether it is from India or outside the country, has not been taking up prices as much. Now, I do not know why. Maybe they are more efficient in purchases, or maybe it's a competitive battle, which is absolutely fair. But there is a big stress in taking up prices in export market. The point that you said about oil is restricted to a part of Africa. It doesn't apply to large other places. For example, Bangladesh, which is a very large player, or Nepal, which is a very big place, or indeed, South America, all countries their economy do not depend on oil. So oil is restricted to a place where it is mostly bike taxis. So yeah, the economy will revive and possibly the driver will make more money. But that does not really swing the overall demand so much that we can take up prices significantly.
Thanks a lot, Soumen, and wish you all the best for your new stint, sir. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Gunjan Prithyani from Bank of America. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi team. Thanks for taking my questions. Firstly, I was just looking for a clarification on this captive fin subsidiary that the board has approved. Is there anything that you can share in terms of the capital commitment that we are willing to put in this business? Because clearly, if we start, if this becomes the key captive FinCo for all Bajaj products, then there will be a significant capital infusion needed here. And how do we split as to what BAF will do and what this captive FinCo will do?
So, Gunjan, the second question first. We don't need to split. Just today, other than BAF, there are 4 other financiers. And there are a lot of dealer outlets where there are 3 of them present. It is up to the customer to choose what they want to choose, basis the offering and the comfort and so on and so forth. So that we will leave the market to decide. I don't think that we are going to allocate these dealerships. On the first question about capital allocation, I think it would not be very heavy because, first of all, it's very early. We, as Rakesh mentioned, and also on the opening remarks, we will now form a company, go to RBI, seek approval, get the approval, and then, kind of float it and do it. So it is not as if that initially, suddenly everybody will come to me. This will take time to build up. Debt is always an option. So I think at this point in time, we don't need to jump into a conclusion that Bajaj Auto will put 10,000 crores of capital and will earn only 500 crores of dividend. I think it's very early days. Initially, there will be obviously some capital put in to start off. But basis how the demand evolves, we will decide the debt equity allocation subject to obviously RBI norms and everything else. But too early to discuss that at this point in time.
Okay, got it. And the second question I have is, Rakesh, on the two-wheeler demand. Now, it's been over 2 years, right? This has been so weak, and you've called out affordability as being the issue given the price increases over the last 2 years. But this is essentially something pretty mass mobility, right? I mean, what is it you think, is really dragging down, and what can OEMs do to change this narrative? Because, there's clearly a need for mobility. So is it that, we need to relook at the price hikes that have been taken, or we need to look at some financing schemes, some thought process, what can change the narrative on this demand for two-wheelers?
Yeah, so the issue is, I think, as people say that automotive sector is a reflection of the health of the economy. I would say that I add on to it, and I would say that the status of the two-wheeler industry is a reflection on the bottom part of the economy, because two-wheelers are used by lower middle class and even lower socioeconomic groups. Like you said, it's a mass consumption. Now our peak was for the industry was in 1819, and since 1819 there is almost a 30% decline in the overall industry. We should have gone up. So there is a big gap. So probably we are at a minus 40% from where we were. And COVID has obviously aggravated the situation, but in some extent it has put a cloak over some of the structural issues which the segment is facing. And they're arising from, over-regulation. For example, the ABS, even in Europe, ABS is mandated not on the basis of CC. ABS is mandated on the basis of power. And here we have added costs because of ABS and taken the prices up, which has affected the demand in the sports segment. Similarly, the insurance, the GST, which represents an opportunity actually, all these have contributed, and actually, if you see the price of a leading entry-level brand in these 3 years has gone up by about 40%. So, given against the backdrop of, let's say, an economy for this segment of people which is underperforming, this has had a difficult, this has created a bit of difficulty. Now it's impossible for an OEM to resolve this. This is not, something which is in our hands. The Indian manufacturing, and I can say it for the industry, and of course I can say it for Bajaj, is very sharp. It's very frugal, and the vendor system, the way costs are managed, are very, very solid. And I don't think there is any fat over there to cut out costs and reduce prices and revitalize the industry. The only silver lining over there is, of course, obviously, as the economy improves, the trickle down will help. But the silver lining over there is the advancement of retail finance. With the ability now through various means and the government's push in this sector, both to banks and NBFCs, fintech companies, this whole area, this is a very, very exciting and a very positive thing, because hopefully it will take credit into the areas, and cars enjoy 85%. In many places we have only got 20% penetration. So that is one silver lining, but overall I don't think we can do anything from it. The upper half economically is performing well, better. There is better purchasing power. There is more consumer confidence in the upper half of the pyramid. And we in Bajaj Auto are therefore tending to focus on this segment. And here our approach is to punch our way out of this through putting out attractive propositions in the product side, which we did very early with 125cc. As you know, we were the first ones to make a slew of new launches in the 125, which has made us capture a 23% odd market share in this segment. We will continue to do that. In 2 hours' time, we are launching our new 250cc Pulsar, which is the biggest Pulsar as yet. And in an effort to excite the customer and excite them into putting their hands into their pockets and taking out that credit card and swiping it for the down payment. So that's the only thing which we can do. I think cost side, we're pretty well covered, but at least for the upper half of the pyramid, keep punching away with attractive new propositions.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Nish Gandhi from Motilal Oswal. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. A couple of questions. Firstly, can you share data on export revenues and our USD-INR realization?
Yeah. So the INR, so many years, the INR realization was, if I remember correctly, 74.9 for the quarter. The overall total export sales in rupee terms is about 4,150 crores.
Okay. And secondly, Rakesh talked about roughly under recovery of 60 basis points in second quarter. Any sense on what was the gross impact after the price increases, prior to price increases of commodities?
Come again? Sorry, I didn't get you.
The gross impact of commodity cost inflation in second quarter?
Yeah, I can give you a number. Just hold on for a sec. Yeah. So the gross cost increase Q2 over Q1 sequential is between 3.5% and 4%.
Okay. And what kind of price increases we took in second quarter and in October?
So our price increases were closer to about 3%.
In 2Q. And any price increase in October?
No, I don't remember any. I mean, 1st of October. 1st October we have taken.
That was about 1.5%.
Oh, much lesser. Much lesser. Sub 1.
Okay. Understood. And lastly, from this NBFC perspective, so gradually this will be replace or making good for any shortfalls or primarily BAF defocusing on two-wheeler and three-wheeler sales. This is what this captive NBFC will make good for that. Is that the objective, or this is also to focus on the newer energy vehicles where financing itself is a question mark given the emerging technology environment?
But Dinesh, I think we are reading too much into it. I mean, there is no segmentation that there is a gap. BAF has been financing BAL vehicles for the last 30 years. We felt that there is, as Rakesh mentioned, there can be a very good integration on the customer side when the OEM and the finance guy is the same. So there are some synergies which we have found out, which will allow us to serve the customer better. This is not meant only for EV. This is not meant to plug holes, because if holes were there, then we would have plugged long time back. So there is nothing of that sort. It's just another attempt to bolster, because as you know, financing is a key selling tool in automobile industry. It's another attempt to bolster it by integrating the customer experience.
Right. And lastly, on exports, in the past they had indicated Southeast Asian markets where we're not doing that great because of COVID impact. Are those markets now making a comeback, particularly in September, October, or still it's well below its normalcy?
So they are coming back, but they're not yet fully back. Like I said, our largest market is Philippines in Southeast Asia, where I would say they're only at 50% level. But that's a welcome relief, because 2 months back they were at 5 to 10%. So they're back to 50%. And hopefully in the next quarter or so, we will see a return to at least 80-85% kind of a level. So they are coming back, but I would say 50% level.
Okay. And just to clarify, this 45% market share in emerging markets you talked about was for 150 to 200 cc segment, right?
Correct. 150 to 250 cc segment, which is the sporty commuter segment.
Got it. Great, sir. Thanks and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Kapil Singh from Nomura. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Firstly, I wanted a clarification on electric vehicles. We mentioned this 500,000 capacity. Can you tell us by when it will come, and does it include two-wheelers and three-wheelers?
The 500,000 capacity I mentioned was for only two-wheelers, scooters. Any investment for three-wheeler will be separate and outside of it. The two-wheeler capacity will be, we are still looking at the location, but mostly it will be in our existing premises in Akurdi. We have 160 acres. There's no production. There's only R&D center. So we are very well provided for space. The three-wheeler investments will take place alongside the three-wheeler plant in Waluj near Aurangabad. What else is it?
When will it come?
Yeah, we're just looking at, we're just putting down all these detailed plans, and we'll be ready to announce the timing, etc., in probably a quarter's time. As we speak, engineering teams are doing the layout, looking at the contracts, the tooling, and all those other equipment lead times, etc.
Okay, I asked because we have 5 months waiting in few of the cities, right? So, will we be able to expand in a big way only after this capacity comes up?
No. So we already have, 5,000 per month capacity already. We can, if we want, we can produce. The issue is the shortages, the supply chain shortages. So this 500,000, what we are talking about is for further expansion over there. Our current capacity is, the current demand can be met by our current capacity from our existing plants. There, the problem, like I said, is the component flow.
Okay. So as of now, it is 5,000 per month, and additional will come with this 500,000 whenever this comes up, or this 5,000 can go up if required.
Yeah, but this 5,000 is from the existing plants. If the other premium segments, as you know, we are establishing a second plant in Chakan, which is for the premium end, KTM, and when Triumph comes for Triumph, etc. That ground breaking has already been done, and civil work has started over there. So that will be the fourth plant. The electric plant will be the fifth plant. So now how this 5,000 pans out, how it gets distributed, is something which the engineering boys will decide in due course. But yeah, so that's the overall is that current 3 plants go to 4 with the premium, and then to the 5th with the electric, and to the 6th with the 3-wheeler investment.
Okay. Basically, what I'm trying to understand, let's say, let's say 10,000 per month by December next year, hypothetically. Are we ready to supply that?
Let's say demand is what?
10,000 per month next year, December.
Yes, of course. I mean, if the demand surges, certainly there is enough. There is enough slack in the system to divert it to electric.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Aditya Jhawar from Investec Capital. Please go ahead. Mr. Aditya Jhawar, please go ahead with your question. Your line is unmuted.
Yeah, couple of questions. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. First is on Chetak. Since we have localized a large part of the supply chain since because of the FAME 2 eligibility. Now, do you have some kind of a visibility on the cost reduction on Chetak going into FY 22, 23 and 24 since you would have tied up with suppliers for the next couple of years?
So, I think we will not get into specific costs in terms of Chetak and next 2 years and all that. But yes, your point is absolutely right. we have been able to optimize our cost significantly. No point going into specifics of how much.
Fair enough. Now, second question is on, captive financing. Now, if you, look at our, domestic business, it has, overall declined by roughly about 7 odd percent, in which the decline for three-wheelers was relatively lower. And Rakesh mentioned that the, share of financing has increased. However, if you look at Bajaj Finserv, they have reported a decline in their AUM by about 16%. So was there any reluctance from Bajaj Financing side to, finance, three-wheelers and two-wheelers? And because what we understand is that post-COVID, the profitability of two-wheeler finances have come under some stress. And do you think that we have lost some sales because of that? And incrementally, will it be a drag till the time our captive financing arm is up and running?
No, not at all. I would not say that at all. In fact, if I sort of recall correctly, there was a period in April or so, in the heat of the second wave, where there was uncertainty around financing, but that we were encountering not from just BFL but from all the financiers, because all the financiers are naturally saying that where is this going, right? So I think it was an industry-wide phenomenon, and whether we have a captive finance unit or whether we are working with BFL or whether we are working with the likes of HDFC, etc., those questions will be addressed in a similar way by the finance company, irrespective of that status. So I don't think we lost share on that account, but I would say yes, the industry as a whole suffered because there was shrinkage of finance across the industry. But once certainty has started to reappear from June, July onward, financiers have come back. In fact, I believe that in the three-wheeler segment, one of the reasons for our galloping market share has been weak retail financing support to our competitors. So to that extent, I would say that we have been ahead in the game.
Sure. No. Yeah. The final question is that what is the share of financing of Bajaj Finance in 1H of 22 versus 1H of last year, or say 1H of 20, more normalized year?
So that will not suffice the hypothesis that you have. Because, for example, in two-wheelers, last year the average of Q1 and Q2 was about 35%. This year it is more like 39%.
Fair enough, Soumen. Thanks, Rakesh, and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Chirag Shah from Edelweiss. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity. My question is for Rakesh. Rakesh, in the past you alluded that in 125cc category, to take up the market share from current 4%, you will need more product introduction. Any more color you can add? Where are we in that thought process? And when can we expect some product action?
So the NS125 was the latest introduction, and now that's already accounting for, I think, 25% of our 125cc portfolio, and with its much superior margins, that's a very, very welcome development. There are a couple of products which are in the works, but I would say that nothing in the immediate term on the 125cc. We will still have to wait a few quarters before we have an absolutely new 125cc being introduced. But yes, it's an important playground for us, and we are looking at coming out with some differentiated propositions out there, which are something very different to what is there in the market, including different from the Pulsars, the existing Pulsar 125.
And secondly, if you can help us understand how does the financing in the international market work, because geographies are different, dynamics are different, and any specific changes that have happened post-COVID in terms of financing in those in the international market, if you can just help explain us, that would be helpful.
The see, financing, there are many different models of financing in the international markets. The most mature financing models and slightly similar to us are in ASEAN area, where you have large banks and specialist auto financing companies. They actually run at much higher sort of interest rates, IRR, etc. So the impact of COVID on them, while it has been there on the volumes, etc., but they are, because of the sheer dint of their very high margins, are able to take, some of these, the NPAs far better. So we have not seen in ASEAN any major fallout of this. Particularly, I'm referring to, let's say, Thailand, Malaysia, and Philippines, where we are majorly present. In a weaker economy like Cambodia, we have indeed seen financing companies that sort of gone into a shell, which has resulted in the three-wheeler business getting. These are financing companies operating largely out of Singapore. So they've shrunk their operations. So I would say, apart from Cambodia, I've not seen an issue. The next region is LATAM, where the financing, a lot of the financing happens through the retail chains, which become, these are also places where they sell motorcycles. And of course, there are banks also. And there I would say, again, we've not seen any great impairment of financing companies or shrinkage or change in financing, big changes in financing terms. They've all been under pressure, but they've been under pressure from a volume point of view rather than from a quality of finance point of view. And in Africa, financing is very, very nascent. But what we are finding is that there are a few countries like Kenya, Uganda, where either cooperative financing or bank financing has started to come in the horizon and is becoming a major factor for driving growth.
Yeah, this is helpful. And one last question, if I can squeeze in. Soumen, on the other income side, if you can help us understand how to look at the treasury income, because it appears we had a good quarter on the treasury side, on the yield side, as compared to some of the other cash-rich companies. So how should we look at that yield for the year, if you can help us understand?
There is a dividend from BHIL which may be vitiating your idea, but which is about, if I remember correctly, about 45 odd crores. So if you knock off that 45 crores, then you should be okay. Also, my cash balance for the first month was much higher because we paid out the dividend in end of July. So month of July, it was not 15,000 crores, it was 17,000 crores, it was 19,000 crores. These two should reasonably explain the other income bit.
And lastly, if you can just spare revenues, you generally share that. So if you can share that.
Yeah. I can only share if I'm asked. Nah. If I'm not asked, I can't say. So spares overall domestic plus export was 1,100 crores. Hello?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Amin Shirani from JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. Most of my questions have been answered. One thing on the EV, launches in cities, you are currently, I think, more, lesser than most of the other guys. So is it a function of the fact that you are not sure about, component production and hence you don't want to launch into many cities, or you are trying to maximize, initially a few number of cities and then, launch in other places?
Yeah, like I've explained that, there's no point having we have found such a great response to Chetak that we find it not right to go and, launch it in 25 cities and spread the meager butter very thinly over the entire toast. The advantage of, for example, you can check the Vahan data and it will tell you that the market share which we enjoy with Chetak in electric is already 40% in Pune city. So, we rather go go deep. It's a balance which we have to strike, because if we, try and service the entire demand of Pune, we will also get excluded from engaging with customers in other places. But if we spread ourselves too thin, then we leave a host of customers dissatisfied. Because earlier we were not sure about how the reception will be, but as we have gone, I mean, the Nagpurs, the Aurangabad, the Bangalore, the Mysore, they just absolutely stunned us and surprised us by the demand which they are putting up for Chetak. So as a result, we have said that, okay, first let's get the visibility and then open the market. But don't forget, besides the customer, the dealers are also making an investment. Now, we can't ask the dealer to open a store and then give him one or two vehicles. We want a proper store. We want all the investments to be made. And then to give the poor dealer only 2 or 3 vehicles a month, that will not be right. So these are all the things which you have to strike the balance on.
And currently you're selling Chetak just through exclusive, or is it mostly the KTM Pro Biking format that you're sharing for the Chetak right now?
Our distribution format in Chetak is that we like to have one experience. It's a hub and spoke thing. We like to have one experience center where the customer can, gets a very good environment and expertise and support to deal with this. And then we used all the KTM stores for retailing. And there is a very substantial online consumer engagement, purchase and program as well. He or she still needs to come to the dealership for the final verification. But today we have the capability of doing the entire transaction, if the consumer chooses, completely online, and only for the final physical verification which the RTO requires. If the RTO doesn't want that, then the customer actually doesn't need to come to a Bajaj Chetak showroom or a KTM showroom. So we have got that. We have the KTM stores, and we have the experience centers. This is the sort of distribution format for Chetak.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the last question for today. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Anand Nirmal for closing comments.
Thank you everyone for attending the call. In less than a couple of hours from now, we have the launch for a new Pulsar version coming up, and request all of you to please log into social media sites for more details. I can also see quite a few of you still waiting to ask questions, and as always, I'm happy to take the call after a few minutes from now, and wishing each one of you a very happy Diwali going forward. Thank you.
Happy Diwali, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of Bajaj Auto Limited, that concludes this conference. Thank you for joining us, and you may now disconnect your lines.